Hello again, this is Caroline with Expat Interviews, Thriving Abroad, where I get the opportunity to talk with the most amazing people living in all corners of the globe, living their best life. And they are kind enough to share their stories with me and with you. And today I have a very special guest who my heart is just beating because when you hear her story, it's going to make you just leap out of your seat with joy and tears. Like it brought me to tears. Sade Diaz, thank you so much for joining me today.
My
I,
pleasure. Thank you so much for
I don't
having me.
My pleasure. I don't know where to begin because let's just get started with your story. But first of all, I want to mention that it is an honor to have a fellow Afro-Cubana to talk with. You know, we don't always get to connect and see a different side. You know, we always think of Cubans as you
Jennifer
know,
Lopez, Sofia
yeah,
Vergara, like, no,
yeah,
honey,
yeah.
we're an island of Black people. Like, even in my hometown of Miami, I'll meet Cubans and they'll be so shocked and surprised that I can speak Spanish. I'm like, have you been to Cuba? I'm sorry, but we're a very diverse island. So I'm always
Have,
here to represent Afro Latinas.
there you go. Have you ever got, just as a side note, have you ever got people say, "Oh, I thought you were Black"?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. And I am Black, just my heritage and is of Cuban descent. So my father's Cuban, but we are of African descent. My Cuban family were Black, and my mother's African American. So I mean, people like to put me in a box and label me all which kind of ways. I'm very proud of my Cuban heritage and I'm very proud of my African ancestry and heritages. So I take and accept them both. But if people ask me, like if I had to check a box, I'll just put that I'm Black because, I am. I feel very much a part of this community, this experience. And especially when I travel, I get treated, very much differently based on my complexion and my hair. So, and I wear it. I wear it with pride.
I love it. I love it. So, okay, let's get into your amazing transformation, your expat journey. You, Miss Cubana, living in Miami, beautiful city, doing your thing, but you had a really cool job. What were you doing
Yeah.
in Miami?
Yeah. So by trade, I'm a paralegal. I worked for attorneys for a number of years. And I absolutely loved my work. And I had the pleasure of working with a major league sports team down in Miami, if you're familiar, or any baseball fans with the Miami Marlins. And so it was an incredible experience because, Miami is extremely dynamic and diverse. And I really felt that our organization reflected, the melting pot and the culture that is Miami. Um, and in the interim, I met my husband, who's Dominican, and he also serves in our military. And so from there, military life, they travel and move quite a bit. And so that's kind of once we decided that we would get married, then I had to make the decision like, okay, am I going to really do this? Am I leaving my job? And yeah, ultimately that's what I did. We wanted to share our lives together, and I love travel. He loves travel. So I kind of looked at it as a really great opportunity, not a loss, but just like an opportunity to experience something completely different than I would have ever experienced living in Miami. The opportunity to live overseas.
Right. So, did you go with him where he was stationed? Uh,
Yeah, so
your
initially
first.
I stayed because initially I stayed behind. I just wanted to be sure that I was ready. And then he ended up getting deployed to the Middle East. And shortly after, I joined him. So we lived in a small Middle Eastern nation called Bahrain. It's maybe a 40-minute drive via bridge from Saudi Arabia, north of Qatar. So in a very like geopolitical, like hot area. And so that was my first experience with Middle Eastern culture. So I was also very nervous and anxious about how that would be. But Bahrain is like, it quickly felt like home. You know, it's an island, there's palm trees, there's beaches, and for the most part, there's a good juxtaposition between like Western living and Arab culture. So I really, really liked how easy it was to transition into Bahraini society. Everyone mostly spoke English. It's an extremely diverse population. They have lots of immigrants who come there to Bahrain for work. And so we spent about 2 years there. And then we got this assignment to move to New Delhi, India. And this is where I've been all throughout the lockdown. So we just hit our 1 year anniversary here in Delhi. And it's been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed living in India very, very much.
And the culture in India, well, it's a lot of brown people that live
Yeah.
there. So it isn't as big, I guess, as a culture shock, although they do have a unique culture. What
Mhm.
was that like for you?
Oh my gosh. So I previously to moving here, I was very hesitant to travel here because, you know, I've traveled quite a bit, but in my mind, India was like the big leagues for traveling because there's nothing about coming here that's simple and easy. Um, of course, there are luxurious places that you can go. There are wonderful beaches, but people come to India for an experience, not necessarily for your quintessential like vacation that you would take like in the Bahamas or Mexico or something like that. And so it was very, very intimidating to me. And I was nervous initially when we found out. And then I kind of welcomed the opportunity like, okay, living here will give me the opportunity to take things in doses versus just like all at once, you know, because it's chaotic in the most poetic way, you know. It's like an organized chaos is what I call it. It's loud, it's gritty, but it's beautiful and in the aesthetic, and the food is some of the best food I've ever had. And what was the most surprising to me is how diverse the country is in the sense of language and culture and customs. You can drive, you know, 2 hours out of Delhi, and people there will speak a completely different language than Hindi, which is like one of the more dominant languages in India. You know, there's Tamil, there's Punjabi, there's like dozens of languages, dozens of religions, and the foods are also quite different from the north to the south to the east. You know, there are what you would consider like, and I hate to say this word, I really need to find a better way, but like they look Chinese, but they're Indian. But they live in the states that border, you know, the Chinese borders. And so they're very much, you know, uh, Indian people, but they look like Chinese or more of like an, and I hate to use the word Oriental too, but of descent. And so that was also kind of a culture shock for me. Um, and then there's a lot of like political and like class issues here that I had to learn about. I wasn't sure what the reception was going to be for me and my hair. And, you know, I feel like my skin color, you know, I would be able to assimilate because most Indians are brown and really dark skin as well. But I knew that there was some other things going on culturally and systemically that I still was trying to figure out. Um, but overseas, you kind of wear the label of American. So I didn't have to deal with a lot of those kind of societal like pressures that local Indians might have to deal with because they look at me just like, oh, she's an American. You're kind of in a bubble of privilege in that sense.
Now, of course, you moved with your husband, but did you get any pushback from family or friends when you initially decided to move abroad? I mean, were people like, Sade, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
I mean, my family knows that I have an adventurous spirit. Um, and so, but of course, they're always going to be nervous and apprehensive about my safety and well-being, being so far away from home. You know, I think immigrant families in particular, we kind of keep our heads down and do what we have to do. We don't try and color outside of the lines or deviate too much. It's just not in our culture as immigrants to do that. And then, you know, you watch the news and they just say all the bad things that are happening around the world. And my family never got the opportunities to travel, certainly not as much as I have. So I think it was just like a matter of exposure. And then slowly but surely they were intrigued. They would often come and visit me, you know, in some of these places, and then they felt comfortable after some time. But I think they'll always be a little bit worried, you know, especially within the last year with COVID and all the other things that are always going on around the world. So
Have you found it easy to make friends?
um So being in an expat community can sometimes present some challenges in terms of assimilating, you know, to the local communities. And one, like in Bahrain, for example, people have tend to have a more modest, more shy nature. That's from speaking from my experience. So for me, it was much, much harder to meet local people because they didn't really just hang out like that, you know? And then here in India, you know, you also have language barriers. And so a lot of people do speak English, but then some don't. So then it's, you know, the onus is on me to learn some Hindi and try and communicate and try to make those connections where I can. But I've been very lucky to have made some local friends, which is such a blessing because when you have someone who's from here, it's just like opens up a whole nother world than you would have been exposed to otherwise, being within like American or Western, you know, bubbles, networks. And so she's taken me to places all throughout Delhi, taking me to the local shops or markets where the locals shop. And it's been great. So I've had an easier time, I think, here in India than I did in Bahrain, making friends in that sense.
Do you know how long you'll be there?
So our time here is almost up, actually. We're here until the beginning of summer, and then we'll be heading back to the States for a few years. And then who knows where the military will send us next. We definitely like to be overseas. So we'll try and put in a request for an overseas post. And then it's the unfortunate part of COVID is that it's been difficult to really explore the country because for 8 months we were on a lockdown. You know, the country is still closed, like the borders are still closed for international travel, but even domestically, we were only able to start traveling within the country maybe a few months ago. So, yeah, that's been challenging for sure.
What have you learned culturally uh, in your travels abroad? What has really like moved you as far as, you know, um, the things that you've seen and the things that you've done that maybe most people aren't aware of that haven't traveled?
Well, first and foremost, I my experience has been is that there's no need to be afraid. You know, people are overwhelmingly kind and generous and wanting to help you, wanting to be a part of you having a good experience in their country. You know, they're very proud of people coming to visit and wanting to learn about their history and their culture. So for me and for Black and brown people specifically, because I've had people message me like, how is it? Has anyone mistreated you in India? I hear that, you know, some people are racist there. And I'm like, girl, that is not the case at all. I mean, of course, there are the instances like that, but if you let those type of presumptions and stereotypes um, debilitate you and inhibit you from traveling, you won't ever go anywhere. You know, I'm from Florida. Like you can, even in the States, where there's racism, there's prejudice. So you gotta kind of have to push against that and just get out there. And it really gives you the opportunity for people who do have prejudices to learn who you are as an individual. And so I really had to kind of break out of that fear of like, will people judge me? Because 99% of the times, they're so happy to have you there. They're so happy to. I've had local people in India who, if I'm just strolling down the street visiting, welcome me into their home and have chai with their daughters and their wife and their families. They're just so kind and generous in that way and wanting to exchange conversation. So for me, that's been the most pleasant thing. And I hope that people will, let go of those fears and just go for it, because most people are really, really kind.
I think you've just led up to the next question that I wanted to ask you, something that I ask all of my guests. I think I know what your answer is. I read it in your bio, which moved me reading this, and I know that you're a very connected and spiritual person. What advice would you give someone who is maybe sitting on the fence about travel, about changing their life? Because you and I both know it's not so much about packing a suitcase and traveling. It's another kind of connection. It's about, being different, following your dream. And even following your dream is not as cliche as it sounds. It is a little different for us that have actually made this. What advice would you give someone?
So I definitely can empathize with the fears and anxiety, because you're constantly told, or at least made to feel like you're not good enough nor deserving of having these, well-traveled lives. We're always made to feel like you have to be on the grind, and partly life is a grind, regardless in what lane that you're in. However, and I've had to work on this myself personally. And one thing I try and remember is that I feel like the universe rewards courage and bravery. You just have to take a leap of faith to, just talk about a platitude. But it's so true. And it's definitely been my testimony and my experience. Um, and you'll be pleasantly surprised that, I had a great life in Miami. I had no reason to leave, aside from the fact that I have fallen in love with this man, and we were now married. But I did have something good, but sometimes, you have to give up something good for something great. And you shouldn't be afraid, to chase after your dreams and explore the world, because home will always be there, and you'll come back. Like, I see the world so differently now, and I'm so thankful and grateful for all of these opportunities that I've had, and I have friends all over the world now, and they teach me things. I'm a sponge. I'm constantly learning from them. And you grow as a person. You're able to see the world differently and learn different languages, trying different foods and realizing, oh, I actually really like this, or I'm really good at picking up different languages. And it kind of unlocks different doors within you that you didn't even know existed. And so it's up to you to you know, kind of push away your saboteur and listen to your heart and your spirit and just kind of go for it.
I love that. That's beautiful sentiments. And I want to let people know how to connect with you.
Sure. So I have my website where I share blogs of my travels and kind of tips and resources for different places that I've traveled to and visited. And you can find that on www.illustratedbysade, spelled SADE.com. And then also I have my Instagram where I, just post pictures, whatever it is that I'm doing in my travels. Same at Illustrated by Sade, as well as my Facebook and my Pinterest page. And so that's normally where I keep everything.
And I encourage everyone to check it out. Hopefully you're going to be as inspired to read the story as I have been inspired, and will feel the same sentiment about travel and what it does and how it really deeply changes you. Sade, what can I say? This has been an awesome experience to be able to
Thank
talk
you.
with you. I wish you many blessings, you and your spouse, and happiness in all of your travels, wherever your feet land. And thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.